Hello to everyone. My name is Stefan Cooper, as Natalie had said, and I'm back to moderate my final segment of the forum and the second to final segment total. This section is for the Secretary of State candidates, and we are joined this evening by Gail Tarleton. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Fantastic. And then current Secretary Kim Wyman. It's a pleasure to have both of you. Let me just put my timer up on the screen here, and then we'll get going. All right, so we're going to start off with introductions, starting with Secretary Wyman. You have 90 seconds.
Well, thank you very much. And I really appreciate the students of Western Washington putting this event together. Tonight, you are going to have the opportunity as a person on a job interview panel to really weigh the experience of my experience with my opponents. And that's what campaigns are, a very public job interview. So I'm going to share with you my resume. I have over 27 years experience conducting elections at the state and county level. I have been nationally certified and state certified as an election administrator, and I've earned the respect of my colleagues who conduct elections at the state level and the county level. And that respect is of Democrats, Republicans, and independents. Over 50 secretaries of state and election officials and auditors have endorsed my candidacy. And that's because I run impartial elections in the roles that I've served as county auditor and secretary of state. What I've really tried to do is make sure that our elections stay secure and accessible here in Washington. And I look forward to tonight getting into the issues and talking about some of the successes we've done here in Washington, because we're a national leader, not only in vote by mail elections, but cybersecurity and really being prepared for the 2020 election. So I'm asking you for your support as voters, because I want to continue making sure Washington's elections remain secure and accessible. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Ms. Tarleton, you also have 90 seconds for a introductory statement.
Thanks so much to Western Washington. I'm State Representative Gael Tarleton, and I am the Democratic candidate for Secretary of State. I'm running for Secretary of State because this job has changed in a pretty fundamental way since the 2016 elections. It became apparent to me as a former defense intelligence analyst and a national security expert virtually my whole career, that when the Russians attacked our elections in 2016, we were facing a very different future. And we needed to address the fact that we would need to be expanding voting rights and voter participation while we were addressing the kinds of threats facing our election systems, networks, and voter data. As a former senior defense intelligence analyst responsible for understanding the Soviet threat to the United States during the Cold War, I now have worked as a leader of technology programs in Russia. I am a technology expert on the critical infrastructure of our climate systems, our electric grid, our communication systems. This job has changed to the point where we need to understand that foreign and domestic parties are trying to undermine our confidence in our democracy and in our elections and the way we conduct our right to vote. I am running for this job to make sure that we have a future with a democracy in place, and I would love an opportunity to earn your support. Looking forward to the questions tonight.
Fantastic. Thank you both so much. You both touched on this in your introductory statements, but it is also our first question of the evening. And Representative Tarleton, sorry for leaving out the title, I was unaware. Representative Tarleton, we'll start with you. How does your background or prior experience prepare you for this position? And you'll have 90 seconds once again.
Thanks so much. You know, we're in a new era. And anytime you have a foreign power trying to undermine our elections, attacking our election systems, our networks, our voter data, undermining our confidence that our ballots are being counted as they are cast. We entered a whole new arena in 2016, but then in 2020, of course, we have our own president attacking the legitimacy of voting by mail, the legitimacy of counting ballots after election night that are postmarked on election day, the legitimacy of voting rights for all people to have a say in our democracy. That's how this job has changed, and that's why I'm running for it. And my background and experience run a broad cross-section in the federal government arena. I was a defense intelligence analyst. In the private sector, I was a leader of technology programs for 2 international subsidiaries of a Fortune 300 company. After the Cold War ended, I led teams of people in Russia and Ukraine and the United States to implement big technology programs. I have also worked at the University of Washington to build international security programs for students seeking career fields in the national security arena. And my experience as a legislator and a Port of Seattle commissioner, leading critical bipartisan legislation to protect our elections and expand voting rights for all here in Washington State.
Thank you so much. And Secretary Wyman, same question to you. How does your background or prior experience prepare you for this position?
Well, I started in elections in 1993 as the county election director, and probably one of the defining moments of my career was when I decided to run for the appointment for county auditor. And I had close friends who came up to me and said, "You're a Republican?" I had no idea. And I realized that it was really important that I remain impartial, even though I ran as a Republican, to do the job every day. I have to inspire confidence in the most liberal Democrat to the most conservative Republican and everyone in between. And that's why I've had now 27 years experience of bringing up voter registration and election management systems that make our elections secure and accessible for every single eligible person in this state. I'm really proud of the outreach programs that we've done and translating our materials into 20 different languages. In fact, I've overseen 120 elections at the state and county level, and each one of those elections has helped make Washington really renowned for our secure system. In fact, the Brookings Institute just said that Washington's elections are the best in the country. We're #1, and we had the only perfect score in their rating system. And I say all of that because I'm really proud of the system that I've helped bring up and had the opportunity and honor to really to help build. And so I want to continue doing this work because our elections are so important that we are engaging everyone from our youngest to our oldest voters. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And moving on to our next question, Secretary Wyman, will stick with you to be the first to answer. Compared to some other states, Washington makes voting relatively easy with automatic registration and mail-in ballots. What steps will you take to ensure that voting continues to become easier and even more accessible for as many Washingtonians as possible?
Really continuing some of the work we've been doing over the last 8 years, getting out into communities and meeting with groups and finding out where the barriers are in those individual communities. For example, we've worked very closely with county auditors across the state to reach out to Native American communities and go into the leadership in tribal lands and find out where the challenges are. For example, we found that non-traditional addresses really prevent a lot of people living on the Yakima Nation land from getting a ballot. So we implemented a system that has geocoded pins that we can drop that are exactly in the precinct where they live, and worked with tribal leaders to put a ballot drop box next to the community center where voters could actually receive their ballot. And so it's really doing that tailored and customized outreach to groups to find out what's keeping them from participating, and really working every day to ensure that we have the most inclusive system that is secure and accurate and inspires confidence. And we're working every day to do that and want to continue doing that. Getting into high schools and colleges and doing K through 12 programming where we're helping students really see the value of their voice and their vote, and helping them understand in every election, not just presidential elections, that weighing in matters and it affects their communities. It affects, everything from the roads they drive on to the books they read in school. And we want to continue doing that well into the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Representative Tarleton, same question to you. Compared to some other states, Washington makes voting relatively easy with automatic registration and mail-in ballots. What steps will you take to ensure that voting continues to become easier and more accessible for as many Washingtonians as possible?
It's so important to understand access from the perspective of those who don't have it, and those who are new to our state, who are just moving here and may have moved from another state or another country and are naturalized citizens and have no idea what it means to, quote, vote by mail or fill out your ballot at home. This pandemic has presented us with the kind of challenge that we should have really tackled to understand that voting by mail doesn't automatically guarantee access if people don't have access to a ballot box that is nearby, if they don't have access to online access to votewa.gov, our elections management and voter registration system, if they don't have voter education information coming from their local auditors. A lot of ideas have come forward from this campaign from students and from those who are in facilities where they don't have easy access to the ballot. Those with disabilities who don't have easy ability to navigate a ballot or an online system. We need new technologies, we need innovation, we need solutions, and we need your ideas. One of the ideas was we should have voter registration set up in our high schools. We had pre-registration of 16 and 17-year-olds, which our Secretary of State opposed. We have that in law right now. Having high schools and community and technical colleges be places where we are also registering to vote is one way of expanding access, and there's a whole slew of other ideas we have too.
Thank you so much to both of you. Representative Tarleton, we'll stick with you to start this question. What is your biggest issue, or what is the biggest issue that you anticipate tackling as the Secretary of State?
Number one is we need to understand why about 800,000 to 1 million Washingtonians who are eligible to vote and our citizens are not even registered to vote. We need to figure out why they are not registering. Automatic voter registration is a crucial ingredient to making that vote accessible to all the people. Our Secretary of State testified in Congress against federal legislation that would have explored how to bring national automatic voter registration to all of the states. She also testified in that legislation against expanded election security funding that would have been very important right now, which is the second issue we must tackle. We must tackle how we expand voter participation, bring in new voters to our democracy, while protecting against the kinds of future threats that we are going to face. Because it's not just about cyber attacks, it's about misinformation, which we are experiencing right now. It is about climate events that are going to disrupt our elections. And it's also about future things like pandemics or wildfires or other kinds of threats that we are going to face. We need to address these kinds of systems, technology issues that we need to be testing our election systems, our critical infrastructure for our elections, to make sure that we understand the vulnerabilities and that we are preparing for them. I also want a big education program for our elections officials, and we can talk about that at the end.
Thank you so much. Secretary Wyman, same question to you. What is the biggest issue that you anticipate tackling should you be reelected as the Secretary of State?
Well, the biggest issue that I think we're facing is the one we're dealing with right now, and that's the cybersecurity threats to our elections, both in terms of attacks, trying to make malware or phishing attacks to get into our systems, to misinformation and disinformation. And my opponent really likes to misstate my record and the way that I have testified in front of Congress and our state legislature and what bills I have and have not supported. But I would just really recommend that you go and look at my record in terms of what we've done. So here in Washington State, we've created the only election cybersecurity operations center in the country. We're not only supporting the Secretary of State's office and the VoteWA system, but we're also supporting the 39 counties that actually do the work day to day. And these are systems and innovations that came on my watch from my visionary leadership, to be honest. And when I go back to the beginning of my election career, we created, for example, the first ballot drop box system in the state. And that was in the mid-90s. And so it's continuing to innovate and really responding to those threats. So it's about, as my opponent just said, it's about not only reaching out to voters, but it's really about protecting your vote, protecting your voter information, and making sure that the information you're making decisions on as a voter is accurate and is trusted and is coming from trusted sources.
Thank you so much to you two again. Secretary Wyman, we will stick with you to begin the next question, which is, what do you want young voters in Washington to know about you?
What I want you to know is that for the last 27 years, I have been a champion of not only innovative ideas for making our elections more accessible and secure, but also trying to connect with young people to get them to see that civic engagement should be part of their life and why it's important. And, you know, the favorite part of my job is going to high schools and colleges and talking to students. In fact, it's been a while since I've been up to Western Washington University, but the programs that you have developed in terms of civic engagement and getting voters, getting students to become voters and to be active and work on campaigns and really get the vote out are just, is a hallmark. In fact, I know that over the last 4 years, Western Washington has really given the other universities across Washington state a run for your money, for their money in terms of civic engagement. And I think that what I want you to know is that I have spent my professional career making sure that our elections here in Washington state engage voters of all age groups and demographics. And for example, just to clarify the record, in Washington state, depending on what you count as the voting eligible population, actually 87 to 93% of the eligible voters in Washington state are registered and participate. And we're really proud of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Wyman. Representative Tarleton, same question to you. What do you want young voters in Washington to know about you?
I have fought for your right to vote. I have fought for your access to the ballot. I have fought for expanding voting rights throughout this state for my 8 years in the legislature. I will fight for your right to vote and protecting your right to exercise your voice in our democracy in the same way that I have fought for the right of dreamers to have access to a college education here, supporting expanded financial aid programs unlike any other period in this state's history, fully funding financial aid for every young person wanting to go on to some form of college education or apprenticeship programs. I will fight for your right to have your voice heard in the ideas and the technology solutions we bring to innovating the next era of elections security as well as elections access. We need to think about how we bring technology to our voters as you are voting, that instead of you're using a paper stub to check the status of your ballot right now, that you might get a text someday from an auditor, and that auditor is telling you what you need to do to fix your signature, or maybe we don't even have a signature anymore because we're using some other form of technology to verify your identity. I will fight for your voice to be heard in a system that rarely brings in young people. I am endorsed by Washington Bus and by the young voters, Young Democrats of Washington, and I would be proud to have your support.
Thank you so much. Representative Tarleton, will stick with you for the last question that I have slated for this segment, which is, how do you plan to meet new and rising challenges to voting security, such as cyber attacks or foreign interference, as somewhat previously mentioned throughout the line of questioning?
With more than 30 years as a national security expert, this is why I am running for this office. This is why the job has changed, and we need a completely different way of understanding the nature of threats. The reason why our democracy is under attack by foreign powers is that they don't want us to exercise self-governing democracies in this country or around the world. I have a long background in understanding where the threat is coming from, and I understand how to fight back. You can't allow attacks to happen on the legitimacy of vote by mail and not expect that there would be a consequence. There are consequences happening right now. We had a lawsuit that our Attorney General had to file against the Trump administration to demand the return of the mail sorting machines that have been removed from the post office. The people have lost confidence in the reliability of our postal service because of the president's attacks that using the post office would lead to rigged elections, that the ballots don't count if they're sent through the mails. And then he attacked the mail system. And our Secretary of State's response to that was, let's have the president come out here and watch how we do vote by mail. That is not a response to the nature of the attack. We not only need to understand where the threat is coming from, we need to understand how to fight back. And that expertise, working with federal, state, and local partners, is what I will bring to understanding the future threats we face.
Thank you so much. And Secretary Wyman, same question to you. How do you plan to meet new and rising challenges to voting security, such as cyber attacks or foreign interference?
What I love about the Secretary of State's role is that we get to, as Secretary of State, I get to impact and affect our election system. So 2 years ago, we replaced 14-year-old servers that were the state's election voter registration system with a state-of-the-art integrated system that not only connects the 39 counties in a way that we've never been able to communicate before, and has helped us implement things like same-day registration in a really positive way, building the security and access that the counties need to be able to provide those services. But we also were able to build the cyber defenses around that system in a way that just wasn't possible even 4 years ago. We put in advanced firewalls and monitoring software that is really giving us tools to address the threats that are actually happening to us here in Washington. And I can tell you that our security posture today is so much more sound than it was in 2016. And quite frankly, in 2016, we were one of 21 states that detected the traffic that was happening with Russian scanning of our system, and not all states did. And so we just continue to advance our cybersecurity posture, and we're continuing to deal with misinformation like what the president has spread on multiple occasions. And doing the work is really important to protect our system. And I have shared facts with the president.
Thank you so much to both of you. That concludes the line of questioning that I have for either of you. I'll give it just a second here with the Q&A option to see if anyone submits anything. But if not, then we'll just go straight into our closing statements. But typing takes a second, so I'll give it just a second if anyone wants to submit anything. All right, and it looks like there are some questions. And so we will go with a question submitted was, as Secretary of State, you must be able to address the concerns of voters who are both a part of your political party and those who are not. How will you make sure both political parties have confidence in our elections? And we will start with current Secretary Wyman, and we'll go with the standard time. Actually, we'll go with a minute. Sorry about that, 1 minute to answer.
Speed round, okay. This is where impartiality is so important because, again, it's about inspiring confidence. And one of the things that we've seen over and over this year is that I have been the person that the media has come to share information about how Washington systems works, sharing that with my colleagues around the country so that they can improve the accessibility of their systems and make voting safe in their states. And it certainly is all over the map and how those states are adopting those systems. But one thing certain is that we have been able to share Washington's experience of having 500 ballot drop boxes across the state to make dropping your ballot easier, having prepaid postage, and really sharing with states what they need to do to build in the security and accessibility in their own voting systems. And all of that goes back to trying to inspire confidence that our system is the most inclusive, accessible, secure system in the country.
Thank you so much. And Representative Tarleton, same question to you. How can voters of both political parties have confidence in our elections?
Look at our records. I have been an elected official for 13 years. I was a nonpartisan Port of Seattle commissioner for 5 years and 8 years in the state legislature, passing some of the most important election security and voter access legislation, broad bipartisan support, sometimes unanimous bipartisan support in the House and the Senate for election security legislation, elections funding, so that the state is responsible for funding the local jurisdictions to conduct state and federal elections. I don't ever go back to Washington, D.C. to testify against legislation. I don't chair Republican secretaries of state leadership committees like my opponent has done to advance the agenda of Republican secretaries of state in different parts of this country. Our state is a leader in same-day voter registration and free postage because the state legislature put those laws into effect. They initiated out of the state legislature, and we push them forward into law for all of you to have access to the vote.
Thank you so much to both of you. And then we will go ahead and go with 1 minute of closing statements from each of you. And Representative Tarleton, will have you go ahead.
So this is where it all comes down to voting rights. We are in the game. We are now D-7 and counting to election day. It's where in all of my 7 races for public office, I have said, it's time to let the voters have their say. It is the time for you to have your vote and your voice heard in our democracy. And despite all of the challenges and all of the threats and all of the promises by the president that no matter what happens on election night, if your vote isn't counted, it's not legitimate, he's wrong. It's misinformation. It's a lie. It's to undermine your confidence that your vote will count. So get out there and vote. I would love to have your vote for Secretary of State to fight for your future in our democracy. I would love to have your vote heard in our state's policies going forward. And be one of those 4.87 million registered voters in this state who are now exercising their right to vote.
Thank you so much. And Secretary Wyman, your closing statement, 1 minute.
One of the accomplishments I'm most proud of as Secretary of State is that I got 39 independently elected officials and myself to agree on something and work on a project that brought us an election management system and a voter registration system that is up and running and has put Washington State in a position to be ready for the challenges and threats of the 2020 election. And that happened because of a collaborative approach to this job and really being bipartisan and inclusive in the way that I operate the office. And I can tell you as a voter that I am committed to making sure that we continue to reduce barriers in this state, continue to have a secure election system that is inclusive to every eligible voter in the state. And I want to continue doing that work for the next 4 years. So I ask for your support and your vote. My name is Kim Wyman and I'm running for re-election. And I thank you for being here tonight for the last 30 minutes to hear these remarks. Thank you.
Thank you both so much to Secretary Wyman and Representative Tarleton for joining us tonight. My apologies to those who submitted questions which couldn't be answered. It was just solely to maintain time, but there were some very good questions submitted. I'll put both the representative and the secretary's websites in the chat for everyone to see. And next up, my co-moderator Natalie will be speaking with the gubernatorial candidate Jay Inslee for our final segment of the night.
Thank you, Stephen. Great job moderating.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.